If you're thinking that looks like a bit of a weird back end of a car, you're absolutely right. I'm in a Honda Insight. This is the first production hybrid car in the world. Let's see what it's like. That engine start is strange straight off because there's a motor effectively on the back end of the engine. So you can't drive around just on the electric motor. It's there to help the engine and boost economy. And there's no starter motor. That motor starts the engine, and it takes a bit of getting used to because the engine is just suddenly alive. The other thing that strikes you straight away is that the gearing is ridiculously tall. There is no way that a 1 litre engine would pull gearing this tall normally. It needs the electric motor. And as I accelerate, it'll do 60 in second gear. It doesn't really, it's not punch at the back acceleration, but it does build speed up deceptively briskly. It's also very good in the bends, handles very well. In many ways it feels just like Hondas of old. If you've ever driven an 80s Honda Civic, it's that same feeling. You sit remarkably low down, the scuttle's very low, it just feels very light and nimble. In a way that sort of harks back to the old Honda S800, which was the first car Honda sold in the UK. I think it was the year 2000, possibly 2001, where we first got the Insight in the UK. Obviously, its famous competitor is the Toyota Prius. But the Honda Insight was an all-out economy car. It's very light, 850 kilograms, and that includes this battery pack in the back. And it's very aerodynamic, very slippery shape. I mean, the shape itself is utterly fantastic. It looks like something Citroën would build. The way it tapers in towards the rear, it's like a miniature Citroën SM. And that helps the car achieve remarkable MPG. I had a drive around town earlier. It was averaging about 72 according to the display there. I've since been having a bit of fun out on the country lanes, and it's still doing 69. It's quite extraordinary. There is a part of me that wonders how economical it would be if it just had a slightly larger engine and none of the electrical nonsense. It's an intriguing question. Sadly, as Honda found out, people weren't that interested in a car that was all about the economy. People wanted a car that could be used as a car, and ultimately that's why the Prius reigned supreme, even though it wasn't actually that much more economical than a diesel. And the Honda Insight, well, they had to completely rethink the formula for the second generation Insight, which is just a family car, and like the Prius, doesn't really offer much in the way of benefits over a conventional diesel, unless you do a lot of town driving. So the theory behind the Insight is that it's 1 litre engine plus electric motor, gives you the same sort of experience as if you were driving a 1.5 litre car normally. That's me getting confused with gears. I went for 5th because it felt like I should be going for 5th, but I'm only doing 40, and because the gearing's so tall, 3rd is better. Although there's a little nagging light on the dashboard which is constantly telling me to change up. And when you follow that light, which I did when I was driving around town, you're in 4th gear by 20 miles an hour, and with the tall gearing, the engine sounds horribly laboured, but I decided, perhaps the car does know best. It won't quite stall because the electric motor keeps it going. It's a very strange driving experience. This one has the manual gearbox. They did also do a constantly variable transmission. I'm quite intrigued to give one of those a go. I suspect that feels a bit better. This Insight has actually been modified so you can plug it into a charger. So that keeps the batteries topped up, which boosts economy because the engine's not having to charge the batteries. And it also keeps the batteries in better condition. So Insight owners have found that if you do do a bit of battery conditioning, the battery packs can last a very long time. And these seem to be very reliable cars as well. Johnny Smith, the fifth gear presenter, owns one that's done over 300,000 miles. This one's only done 75,000, it's barely run in. I've been glad to get a go in one of these because I generally have a problem with cars post 2000. I just find them dull and pointless and not as good as they should be. It's like innovation died and everything just became pure marketing. There's a lot of technology at work in this car and it seems reliable and works well. One thing is, if you like acceleration, then this probably isn't the car for you. The really tall gearing just blunts it. So while it picks up speed in a manner that's certainly very, very impressive for a 1 litre engine, it's all a bit frustrating. It's not really a driving car, which is a shame when it handles so well. Right, so here we go. I'm stopped at the side of the road. Let's do a 0 to 60 acceleration test. This isn't really what hybrid cars are meant to be about, but I'll put my foot down, move the gear lever, there's the engine starting up, and here we go. And that's 60, and I'll go straight to fifth gear. I suppose it feels fairly brisk to 60 because you only change gear once. But here's the problem, it's a 1 litre 3-cylinder engine. I love 3-cylinder engines and I like to hear the noise they make. But I suspect doing that too often isn't very good for economy. Oh look, I'm being tailgated by an Audi and you can see that quite clearly. Blowing Audi drivers. Ultimately, the first generation Honda Insight was a bit of a dead end. It was a bold attempt to bring hybrid technology to the marketplace, but it was let down by being too focused. For a small majority, these cars are brilliant, and there's a very, very enthusiastic following for the Insights. But for too many people, it was a compromise too far. Most people like to have a rear seat or a boot where you can actually put stuff securely. For that reason, the Prius, even though it's not as good, was the car that ultimately triumphed. And that forced Honda's second generation Insight to be much more of a Prius clone. I mean, it's unusual for a hybrid in having a manual gearbox. Usually the way to go is an automatic for more of a seamless progression. And ultimately, you don't really drive this car any differently to any other car. It doesn't feel as exciting as a pure electric. Really what I'm trying to say is the Honda Insight is quite flawed in quite a lot of areas. It's not got very good suspension, not very practical at all, and the hybrid system is ultimately not a successful design. I'm now approaching some traffic lights, so I've eased off, regen's at full effect. As we come to a stop, there is complete silence because the engine has now cut out. This was one of the first cars you could buy that had stop-start technology. Even quieter, but that tailgating Audi is making quite a racket. Ooh, Volvo 740. Winning. So overall, I'm not sure this car has made me change my mind about hybrids. I've always considered them a pretty poor compromise. You've got all the downsides of an internal combustion engine, allied to the fact that you're now carrying around an electric motor and a battery pack. So there we have the Honda Insight. A car which is very clever and was ultimately a dead end. I'm not quite sure it's quite the car I'd hoped it'd be, but it's certainly a very interesting one. And when it comes to classics of the future, this one is a guaranteed hit. See you next time.